Hey everyone, it's Phil Wade from Dalton Wade Real Estate Group. How are you tonight? Thanks for tuning in. Please let me know who's here. Hey Lisa, and just let me know how the hey Victoria, how are you? And Bill, how you doing? How's the audio, everybody? Always worried how I sound, so let me know how that. Oh, good. That's great that's coming through. Hey David, how are you? All right, good. Hey Trevor, how you doing? All right, we'll wait a minute and then we'll see if anybody else is. Hey BB, good to see you. We'll see if anybody else is going to pop on, but then we'll get going. So tonight we're going to be talking about the listing agreement, and really the mechanics of it, so that you fill it out correctly. And if your client, the seller, ever asks, "Hey Wanda, good to see you," you're able to kind of speak to and cover all the the different areas of the agreement. So. And again, if anybody has any questions, just ask. That's what we're here for, to answer those questions, get that good discussion going, and hopefully we all learn a little bit. So, all right, it's a couple minutes, minute after 7. So let's get started. And let me move the slide. Hold on one second. All right. So again, it's it's the exclusive right of sale listing agreement. It's kind of the standard one that we use. And we'll kind of go through section by section. So section 1 is is the seller's name, or if it's husband and wife, both names. Typically, you want whoever's on the deed, to have their name, and then it's your brokerage. Their name goes on line 3, and then again the length of the agreement in terms of how long the contract is going to be for. Now, again, there's no sort of set rule. Sometimes you might do 30 days. You really want that listing. Hey, try me out, test me out. Let's see how it goes. And you kind of give them a shorter time if, maybe they're being a little bit stubborn. Or you might try to go for, 6 months. Hey, Phil, the best training is right now. There you go, Gio, exactly. Hey, Carmen, or you might try to go a little bit longer. Typically 90 days. Especially in this market, guys, most things are selling fairly quickly. So if you get it priced right, you should, have no problem selling it, within that sort of 90-day time frame. So that's kind of section 1. Moving on to section 2. If you guys have an opportunity to, open up and print out, or you actually have the listing agreement, some of this will be a little bit more meaningful. I actually have a copy right here, so to kind of help me, a little cheat sheet, so to speak. So we all need a little bit of help, now and there. So all right, so section 2 is the property address, and then the legal address. You can get that off the county appraiser website, and put that in there. The next section is any personal property that's going to remain. Typically a big one is the washer dryer. And I just kind of mentioned that. I had an agent call me, pretty experienced agent. He called and said, they're not leaving the washer dryer, but it was in the MLS. So again, the MLS doesn't really matter. All that really matters at the end of the day, not so much the listing agreement, but the actual contract, the purchase and sale contract overrides anything in the MLS. So again, but you want to ask your clients, hey, are you planning to leave the washer dryer, or any other personal property, or are you taking that, like the refrigerator? They can take the refrigerator if they want. I mean, it doesn't make, the best, but most people usually leave it, but sometimes, they want to take it. So that's section 2. And then the last one is if there's a tenant, you're going to check either not occupied by tenant or occupied by tenant. Pretty standard. Then we're going to move into section 3. Section 3 talks about, the price. Hopefully you've done your CMA for them. Oftentimes, they're going to kind of give you the price potentially. Is usually how it works. They usually have an idea in mind, but you're going to come up with, what it's going to be listed for. And then all this information, like the price, is what it all has to tie out to what you're putting in the MLS. What type of financing? So you're going to, obviously conventional cash. If the property's under, I think it's 292 right now, and you feel it can go FHA. VA has a higher threshold. Actually, there is no threshold. Sometimes they can get a conventional loan for the rest. But so what type of financing it's going to go. And then again, this rarely ever happens. But the assumption of an existing mortgage, that's possible. I believe FHA is assumable. So if you got somebody with a low interest rate, now that interest rates are starting to go up, that might be something that seller could offer up to the buyer. So any questions on these first three sections before we kind of move along? Any questions? All good. Thank you, Christy. All right. So section 4 has to do with, the broker's obligation, what efforts you're going to put forward. Read it. I'll read it out loud for you. Broker agrees to make diligent and continued efforts to sell the property until a sales contract is pending. So you got to keep at it. That's your obligation. That's what you're telling that seller you're going to do. So, you need to do it. You need to continue sort of working it, doing open houses, promoting it. And then section 5 is, it's going to be entered into the, to the MLS. One thing that the MLS does require is, the property data sheet be uploaded or the broker synopsis be signed, but you need some type of documentation. And again, this isn't really about the listing agreement, but this is more MLS compliance. You need some type of documentation, that the seller has signed off on what you're inputting. So again, if you're ever audited or, they want to see your paperwork, you need to have that. So that can be found in Transaction Desk. If you're working in Transaction Desk, you can actually, put all the information right there. And then if you've purchased AuthentiSign, you can just upload it. And that way you only have to input the data once. All right, so moving on, that's pretty basic stuff. This is where it gets a little more tricky, and what you're going to need to do here is make sure that, when you're actually doing the listing input, what the people check and how you, needs to tie into what's on the contract, and then what's in what's in the MLS. So advertised property on the internet, pretty basic. Everybody's going to want that. Sometimes people don't want their street address. I'm not a believer in that, but there's a box you can check. And then, if you check that box when you're actually, and that's what they want, when you're actually inputting it into the MLS, you want to make sure you check the correct box so the street doesn't pop up. They're authorizing you to use a lockbox system. If you're going to want to withhold verbal offers, I never check that box. Verbal offers, sometimes people put in verbal offers to see, they're kind of testing, what that seller's temperature is. Maybe it's a low ball offer. Maybe it just gets the discussion going. Again, they're non-binding, obviously, but sometimes it can get, again, I don't check that box. If someone wants to give me a verbal offer, fine. Withhold offers after property is pending. Again, I don't check that box, because you never know, the deal may fall apart. Again, you want to do everything to kind of convince your client, that you're doing hey, Michelle, how you doing? That you're doing everything possible, to get that property sold. And sometimes deals fall apart, either due to the inspection, the financing, what have you. So again, you're going to tell them, hey, I'm going to keep on, sort of marketing your property, keep working at it. The virtual office has to do with, where the listing goes. So you want to check that box. The automated remarks, that's primarily Redfin, and their wisdom came up where their agents can make remarks on listings that they've shown. And then those so you can kind of suppress those if you end up, checking that box. So again, then that's not allowed. again, you know, I don't know, it's kind of a two-edged sword. If somebody's saying something good about the property, it can potentially help. These are going to then be on Redfin's site. But if you don't allow that, then, you know, that feature isn't available. All right, looks like Janny has a question or is typing something. All right, we'll keep on going. Section 7 has to do with what are the seller's obligations, right? So you want to, you know, kind of review that with them. Thank you for doing this. Hey, I love doing it. I think it's helpful. You know, we all want to be as good a real estate agent as possible. This sometimes can get a little tricky, and you never want to, be in that listing appointment and then start stumbling over this, you know, the contract. So you got to kind of, you know, read the whole thing, make sure you understand. I mean, that's what we're doing. We're trying to make sure we understand, you know, in case somebody asks, meaning the seller, because it's not so good if you don't really know what the contract says and you can't explain it to them. It's kind of a good way to end up, you know, not getting their business. So, all right, so the seller's obligation, let me read it. It basically says that, you know, they're going to cooperate with the broker. They're going to refer people that they come about, you know, to you. It basically, you know, tells them that they're going to be doing everything they can, you know, to work with you. They're going to cooperate with you. They're going to provide you keys. They're going to indemnify the broker. They're going to comply with FIRPTA. FIRPTA, anybody know what FIRPTA is? FIRPTA is the Foreign Investment Real Estate Procedures Act. So it has to do with foreign buyers. So foreign sellers. So there's a tax, the IRS, when the property closes, and there's some, there's some exclusions, but again, that's a whole training, you know, it's one of the trainings right within itself. So again, you know, Google FIRPTA if you have any questions. But I mean, in Florida, we have a very, very, you know, I started my career in Massachusetts. I never even heard of FIRPTA up there because, you know, there's very few foreign sellers, you know, in Massachusetts, but in Florida, we got a lot of them, right? Because people, you know, Canadians, Europeans, South Americans, you know, they want to be here. Everybody loves Florida, right? That's why I moved here. So, you know, so that's all good. But again, if you have a foreign seller, you need to be able to explain to them FIRPTA, and basically it's a withholding tax. What part of Massachusetts? I was from Boston, you know, but actually, I don't miss it because I love the weather. I love that it stays light here. So a lot of good stuff. How about you, Lena? Where are you from? Are you from Massachusetts? So that, you know, and then again, this is a big one. Make all legal disclosures. So that has to do with, from Boston too. A couple people from Boston. So I was actually from South Boston. So they call that Southie. I've lost my accent, but anyways, it's a good place, and it's a little bit different. Westboro. David, very good. I didn't know that. Not too far. East 8th Street. I was F Street. Awesome. It's a small world. Hey, Christine, I see you're on section. Did I miss the first 6 sessions? You did, but you can watch the replay. Watertown. Awesome. Not too far. Yeah, the Red Sox beat the Yankees, so that's all good. We're on. But anyway, so again, this is make all legal disclosures. So this is important, right? The number one way we can get in kind of trouble as a listing agent is something doesn't get disclosed, right? So you want to talk through with your client that any material defect in that house, you know, needs to be disclosed by them. And then you might have them do a seller's disclosure. That's a requirement at Dalton Wade. The seller's disclosure is going to help them identify any issues, right? And then when you're out there, you know, you're kind of looking, or you're, you know, doing some things may come up that need to be disclosed, right? That you found, right? I mean, you know, I had a client, I was doing their open house, and, you know, they said, how'd the open house go? And I go, it went great. We had about 10 people. And they go, oh, did anybody notice the, you know, this was like a $900,000 house. Did anybody notice the living room over in the corner? The living room, you know, floor was lifting up because a big tree and its roots were growing under it. So now we got to disclose that, right? So disclosure is very, very important. If something doesn't get disclosed, are we held accountable? You know, it kind of depends. It kind of depends. It's a sticky, you usually get sucked into it, Lisa. I mean, again, if somebody truly didn't know, that's a different issue. If you never knew, that's a different issue. But most times the seller does know. And why sellers don't disclose things is because of the money. It's devaluing, their property, and they don't want people to know about it, so they get more money. So, again, that's why you have them sign things. That's why they sign the listing agreement that says they're going to disclose things. That's why, they're going to sign the seller's disclosure that says, they've told everything, right? So, here are the worst ones. This is a pet peeve of mine. The worst ones are the investors and the flippers, right? They don't care, and I'm sure you've all seen this as buyer's agent. Never have lived there. Never. Does the disclosure protect us? I mean, it can, disclosure is controversial because some brokerages don't have their clients do disclosures, because then sometimes it can be nitpicked. Here's the thing. I mean, it's supposed to be disclosed. If they're hiding stuff, they're liable, right? And again, like when, and again, as a, not as a listing agent, but as a buyer's agent, be skeptical. Be skeptical when you're out there. There's some shady people that are looking to pull the wool over buyers' eyes consciously, on purpose. They're not nice people. And unfortunately, when they're not nice people and then they're your client, it's not so great. You got to be careful. But, as a listing agent and as the buyer's agent, you got to be skeptical, right? I mean, and here's the thing, like, if the buyer found out, would they be upset? Would they feel they've been taken advantage of? Right? That should have been told to them. And if the answer is yes, then you got to tell it to them, right? And if the seller doesn't want to tell it to them, you got to get on the phone with your broker, throw it right up to your broker, and ask, oh yeah, we always suggest an inspection. Most definitely, Carmen. I mean, anybody not doing that is not wise. But again, it's people, they know what's going on. Trust me, they know. Again, when they say they've never lived there, what is that? That's BS. That's crap. They know exactly everything about their house. If they have a tenant in it, and the tenant, who's the tenant calling? So it's when you see that, like, don't know. Or everything is crossed out. I've never lived there. And you're the buyer's agent. Put that listing agent send them an email. Hey, are there any defects that you know about that need to be disclosed? Put them on notice, ramp it up, right? Because that's what that's where our exposure is somebody buying something from us and it didn't get disclosed. And, when, And as the listing agent, you got to be aware of that. That's what that's the meat, right? That's where we have issues, is when something, and I can give you, as the broker, and I've said this before, my agents, I encourage everybody to call me. I'm here to help you. You have an issue, call, we'll figure it out. But, typically they don't call and say, hey, Phil, I just had an easy transaction. I love selling real estate. It's great. No, they call when there's like something's messed up or an issue or something, and again, it's hard to know. I mean, is that listing agent, are they dumb, or are they, in cahoots with the seller? I don't know. It's always hard to know, but I always think, they're in cahoots, and, they want, like, here's a quick one, just as an example, right? The listing agent is with a big brokerage. So it's a townhouse, and the townhouse has a lanai, like a 200 square foot lanai. You go out the living room door, you're on the lanai. You turn on the light switch in the living room, it turns on the light in the lanai. They have a tenant. The tenant has all his stuff on the lanai, right? So there's no seller's disclosure. The agent asks, they get it filled out. They answer every question except there's two questions on easements and encroachments, and they say don't know. Every other thing they knew, that they say don't know. Now, the buyer's agent should have pressed on him, like, what do you mean you don't know? But he didn't. Come to find out, the lanai is on somebody else's property. They don't own the lanai. Now, the listing agent, right, he didn't take pictures of the lanai. He didn't mention the like. To me, that's not enough. That's wrong. He's a dirtball, because he knew anybody would think, any reasonable person thinks that lanai is part of that house. He should have disclosed that, but he chose not to. That's wrong. Now, he didn't take, like, if you're doing a listing, right, and it has a really nice lanai, you're going to mention it, take photos of it. He didn't do that, but that doesn't get him off the hook, because he knew. Anyway, so things like that. Skeptical, ask that extra question. Or I got a bunch of questions. Let me kind of go back to them. Let's see. So Christy had a buyer wanting a flip, seller said, we didn't live there. I stated you took it to the studs and flipped it in good faith, complete. Got it done. Yeah, exactly. You pushed on them, Christy. That's exactly what you want to do. Really, they know. They know. They're just, it's this weird thing, and it actually is wrong, right? Because it says you're going to disclose, any material defects, right? So don't be afraid to fill it out. It doesn't get you off the hook. And it is great that you pushed on them. That's exactly what you need to do. Let's see. Not all, but a lot of investors. Yeah, I got messed up. Yeah, I mean, that's what it is, Monique. I mean, that's what they do. Because for them, it's the money. Like, there's no, like, they didn't live there. No, it's an investment. It's the money. So those people, flippers and investors, are more likely to, like, violate the disclosure rules, not disclose stuff, because they're focused on the money. And they don't care, because what ends up happening, unfortunately, is once you close, then it's difficult, right? Then you got to go back and sue them, or, and it's harder, right? So again, when you're working with a flipper, or you're working, meaning you're the buyer's agent or the listing agent, be extra skeptical, right? I mean, you always want to be skeptical. Always get if seller agent says, yeah, there you go. Exactly, Ted. That's exactly, I see that a lot. Where seller, is that good enough, or should we push? I mean, again, the seller's disclosure is not like a mandatory thing, right? What is mandatory and what is the law is that any defect be disclosed. Any material defect that you readily, like a roof, right? Like if a roof is old, that doesn't have to be disclosed, because you can see it. The inspector's going to tell you, right? You can kind of tell it's old, but it's when it's something that's hidden, right? Or like you don't know, like the lanai. Yeah, you can push, but again, they're not obligated to, I mean, you can only do, but you got to be thorough, right? You got to have that good home inspector. You got to check, and you just do the best job you can. Code violations would show on appraisal. No, code violations don't show on an appraisal. Unfortunately not. No evidence of a permit. That's probably not gonna show. I mean, that's something that, I mean, it may come out, code violations, permits. I mean, they're dicey, because, there's not like one person, meaning the title company. I mean, the title company should, through the municipal lien search, come up with any code violations, right? But again, it's and if you look at the as-is contract, the seller is under no obligation to get any permits, So again, you want to make sure, I mean, you always want to check the county record. The county record is like the Bible. The county record is what that house is. Period. Right? If somebody added, an addition and didn't get it permitted, it's like it's not there. If somebody turned a garage into a third bedroom, well, it's a house with a garage, right? I mean, so how that affects the value, again, I mean, sometimes the appraisal will catch it. They're going off, usually the county record. So again, you want to be skeptical. You want to check that stuff out. All right. So Victoria says, I'm dealing with that hasn't done the, so my client is flying and wants to see the property. What are my options? I mean, basically your options, Victoria, is to say to them, hey, are there any material and put it in an email, and hopefully they'll respond back to you. Are there any material defects on this property that I need to know about? I understand your client's not willing, point blank. Hopefully they've asked. They're the ones liable, right? I mean, everybody gets sucked in, whether it's the buyer's agent, and again, it doesn't happen very often at all. Usually it gets found out through the home inspection, through the appraisal, but again, sometimes things can slip through and it can end up, causing a problem later. So you want to really make sure, you understand, I mean, every single time what that client's buying. Who are these people selling it to them? Ask them. Put them on record so that if down the road there is a problem, well, you told me there were no material defects. So if there's been a previous inspection or claim made to the homeowners, they have duty to disclose, correct? Yeah, they do, but here's where the problem is, Leah. They don't disclose it, right? They don't disclose, right? They're dirt balls. Trust me, they're out there. Really, they are. It happens. I can give you 10 stories of where like the listing agent is either stupid or in cahoots, trying to cover it up. I mean, here's one quickly. So this guy, he's the listing agent. He's the buyer's agent on a bank-owned property. It says right in the realtor remarks on that listing that there's been a mitigated sinkhole. So he's the buyer's agent. They buy the house. They rehab it. Now he's the listing agent. No mention whatsoever of that sinkhole on that listing. Zero. The homeowner, I mean, the inspector found it. Thank God. The client walked away. I called the guy's broker. I'm like, I just want to know what's going on with your agent. Bad. I mean, I wanted to I almost wanted to file a complaint against him, because I think obviously, he has to be stupid or he's malicious. I mean, because he knew about it, because it was right there in black and white. All right, Chrissy says disclose, especially if I will say the only time I've had a seller. Yeah, I mean, sometimes it can be that they actually never lived there, right? But most times, maybe they did never live there, but they owned it. And anything that happens, they're the ones finding out. Like if they have a tenant in it, the tenant is calling them. It just doesn't fly. It doesn't really make any sense. And for me, it makes me nervous that, the person is trying to pull the wool over my eye, because I've seen it where they do. All right, so we kind of got off the topic a little bit. Important. What about Chinese drywall listed with CD? Was a flip and CD was done. We listen and list agent never said. Yeah, again, that's especially if he was the buyer's agent. Come on. I mean, people like that. Should not be out there practicing. I mean, there's I don't know. Again, I was an agent in Massachusetts for 7 years. I've been here 3 years. This is the Wild West, guys. This is the Wild West. There are some bad real estate agents out there, and this whole unpermitting, is just more, it's just a much more loosey-goosey place, so that potentially, it can become a problem, and you don't want that problem. Your brokerage doesn't. It's just a waste of time, but you get dragged in. Yeah, I mean, that's terrible, Christy. If I owned it, even I never listened. Yeah, of course you would. Exactly, Ted. You're gonna know. So that thing, they never lived there and they just signed don't know. It's a lie. They know. I don't know why agents do that. If a repair has been completed, the seller still need to disclose that there was a problem at one time. Joan, that's a great question. I mean, it really depends on the situation. If there was a sinkhole that got mitigated, yeah, that needs to be disclosed. If trying to think, what else? I mean, yeah, I mean, it's better to disclose it, right? Because especially if if it's been fixed, it's not going to affect the value, right? But what the buyer's going to think when they find out is like, oh, what else aren't they telling me? What else are they trying to sneak by me? So as for the seller, and the seller's agent, yeah, it's better to disclose it. It makes it, you just have a better shot. You're more trusting. All right, let's keep going. Good stuff. I mean, sinkhole information is on. Thank you, Victoria. That's great information. I mean, the whole seller's disclosure part of it, that's a training kind of in itself. So we do those. It's one of the, kind of regularly scheduled ones. But all right, let's keep going here. All right, so Section 8, this is important. This is one I see a lot of agents get wrong. So Section 8 is the compensation for the broker. Yeah, hey, Billy, how are you? Thank you for being here. Yeah, I mean, yeah, don't take the listing, I mean, again, or if you want to disclose something and they're not willing to do it, then you need to call your broker and hopefully your broker tells you walk away because it's not worth it. I mean, let them find somebody else. All right, compensate broker, Section 8. So that's the total. I mean, as the broker, I review all the listing agreements, right? I have a place where I have to sign, right? And they'll come through and it'll be 3%. And for the buyer's broker, 3%. Oh, that's great. You want to work for nothing. Awesome. Good job. Have at it. No, that's the total commission. So in Section 8 is 6%, 5%, whatever it is. The total commission goes there. And then you want to fill if you're going to get an option, if you're going to lease it. Doesn't happen too often. Broker fee is due any sale failure for the seller to sign for a full price offer, right? That's, again, if sometimes sellers change their mind. You get them a full price offer and it's still not good enough. Well, the commission is still due. Retained deposits, that's another one. So some brokerages, some agents, so they get half the deposit. So if the deposit was $5,000 and the seller ends up getting it, they get $2,500 of that. So for me, I always put 0 because it can start making you do things as an agent that aren't sort of aligned with what you should be doing. You're looking to get set the buyer's deposit as opposed to kind of get the deal done. So again, typically it's 0, but again, sometimes, I mean, these contracts the listing agreement is all written to sort of protect, the brokerage. So that's retained deposit. You might have, ask your broker, what his policy is. Everybody good on that? I mean, this is an important one. Again, compensate. Sometimes I'll have people say, well, if you're getting 6% and then you're giving 3%, that's 9%. I don't want to do that. Well, I'll write in the additional terms, the most the seller can pay is 6%. The listing broker pays the buyer's broker, right? That's how that works. The seller pays the listing broker. The listing broker pays the buyer's broker. That's the mechanics of how that works. So again, the total commission goes there. Everybody good on that? I just see that done incorrectly very, very often. All right, Section 9 is the co-broke. So again, whatever you're offering to, the buyer's agent, 3%, 2.5%, whatever it happens to be. And then sometimes, we have this, depending where you're located, typically, St. Pete, Tampa, Clearwater, there's this thing called MLS fees. There's no such thing as MLS thing. It's just what it's called. It's the listing agent taking part of the buyer's agent's commission. Now, if you're down in Sarasota or over in Orlando, that doesn't exist. It's 3%. That's it. So again, depending where you are, you may want to, have, some type of transaction fee, that gets charged to that buyer's agent. All right, section 10 is the brokerage relationship. So depending on, how you're going in, dictates again, this is, so at Dalton Wade, the default is transaction broker, right? Somebody might want to be a single agent. Somebody might want to have a non-brokerage relationship. So depending on what that is, so that's section 10. And then depending on what it is, there's a different contract for each type of relationship, right? So transaction broker, single agent, non-brokerage. So each one has its own sort of section, and that's section 10. That explains kind of what the brokerage and what the agent's duties are. All right, section 11 has to do with if they terminate you or if the contract needs to end early. Are you going to charge them a fee, right? Maybe you'll charge them for your photos, $200 or $500 if they cancel on you before this ends. They owe you some money. Again, if you can get it, great. I mean, would I take a listing if they kind of put up a little bit of a fuss? Yeah, I'll take it. And, kind of the client's right. I want the listing. Hopefully I can get it sold. It all depends. Like, when you get into kind of, what the price is. Oh, this is a good listing. I know I can sell this pretty quickly. This is going to be hot. This is a good listing. It's $350,000 right in a nice place. I'm going to meet some good buyers. I'll take my chances and put that as zero. The more of these you do, kind of the more experience you get as like, okay, how's that going to actually work out there? All right, section 12 is dispute resolution. Again, Dalton Wade agents, we always sign this. It's going to go to arbitration. It's never happened, but just in case that one time where you get into a dispute with the seller, it's going to be arbitrated as opposed to going to mediation. Section 13 is miscellaneous, kind of some boilerplate stuff. Section 14 is additional terms, right? So if anything is going to be written in there, maybe you're going to do something like, 6%. But if you find the buyer directly, you're only charging them 4.5%. You would kind of memorialize that in the additional terms. Maybe there's an exclusion. They know Charlie, and Charlie's mentioned buying their house. And if Charlie buys the house, you only get 2%, something like that. And then obviously you're going to sign it. The broker's going to sign it, or at least sign that, dispute resolution section or initial it. And then you're going to, get it all signed up, and you're going to return it within 24 hours. There's a fine if FREC ever audits, and this hasn't been sent, emailed back to the seller within 24 hours. That's a fine. So you want to get that documentation back to, back to the seller so they have a copy. And that's pretty much the entire agreement, so hopefully, it's mechanical. The more of them you do, the better you'll get at it. But again, read through it, make sure you understand each section. If there's something you don't quite understand, ask, because you don't want to get called out on it in the listing appointment and then start fumbling over it. So any questions before we wrap it up? It's been a good, good discussion. We've got about 60 people here, which is awesome. You guys all should be commended, taking time out to sort of do this. So any questions before we call it a night? Thank you, Christy. I appreciate that. Hopefully everybody got some. Amar, good stuff. 10-4, awesome. Thank you, Victoria. Hey, Natoya, how are you? Good to see you. How's Texas? Awesome. The salesperson, it depends on your brokerage's policy, Gio. The salesperson can sign. Some brokerages require, I let my salespeople sign, but the only thing I do always ask, and we do, is that arbitration, which is section 11. We always sign that. There you go. Hey, AJ, how are you? Good to see you. Thank you, Debbie or Deborah. Awesome. I appreciate it. Good stuff. Thank you, everybody. All right, Christine. So there's going to be an email that comes out to you after. Hey, Peggy, good meeting you today. Thank you so much. So Christine, after there's going to be an email, and then it's going to allow you to access the replay. So you just click on that. You can watch the replay, and then you should be all set. All right, Trevor, thank you. All right, guys, thanks so much. Have a great evening. Appreciate everybody. Awesome. Thank you. Good night.